So here we go. We're going to talk ourselves about social psychology of materialism and wealth. So the question, does money buy happiness? And of course the standard answer is hell no, okay? And we find that's very troublesome because here what we see in the on this image here, we see across time on the bottom and then important scores or something along the left. And we see being very well off financially has become more and more important to incoming freshmen, whereas developing a meaningful philosophy of life has become less and less important to college students. So if money doesn't buy happiness, and we'll talk about that moving forward, would a little more money make you a little more happy? Yeah, a little more money is one more vacation. A little more money is one more something. And so, yeah, it becomes a problematic idea. Okay? So, here is an interesting thing. What we've got here is gross domestic product along the bottom, or gross national product, whatever, is basically the amount of money per person. And then along the left side is something subjective well-being or, happiness of sorts. And what we find is that, yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, money doesn't necessarily buy happiness, but it can get rid of unhappiness. It's not a bad thing right there. But once you cross a certain threshold, then all of a sudden you see the curve levels off at some point there. And so adding more money does not, in fact, lead to more satisfaction. We find that the materialism has been rising. I mean, take a look on the top right. The average square foot of a new single-family home has just been going up, 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 up. And look at the little image down on the bottom left, and we see the blue line is credit card debt per household, and the bottom is median household income growth. So we find that credit card debt has been skyrocketing, whereas income growth hasn't particularly been rising. In fact, yeah, look at that underneath my head. I just missed it. Steve Jobs was a genius. He absolutely perfected the idea that you don't want an iPhone, you need an iPhone. Wow, genius. So we can talk about, and I'll talk about in a series of slides, about, why this increased materialism. Could it be possible that this is a product of evolution? Evolution wants us to have stuff? Is the culture telling us that that's what it comes down to? Is religion? Or even learning theory or something like that? So let me give you some biology behind it. Here's a classic example. They had, I think, five bottles of wine. You're supposed to taste them, and they all had different prices on them. But of course, what you find is that two pairs of those were the same bottles of wine with different price tags. And so what happened was, as expected, if you have two bottles of wine or the exact same wine, but one has a higher price tag, people say it tastes better. However, what we find is that here on this next slide, if we combine these two things together, that taste is not on the tongue, taste is in the brain. And to the degree that if you have a higher price tag, it triggers more dopamine or other pleasure receptors in the neurotransmitters in the brain, then it really does taste better. Okay? Wow, it's all in your head, so it's true. Huh? Some people use, some of these mega churches use the prosperity gospels as a justification. Does God want you to be rich? And some people say no, and they can quote a variety of Bible verses, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, etc., etc. But the prosperity gospels, what they do is they quote certain other parts of the Bible, like, but remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms His covenant. In other words, by being wealthy, it confirms God's love for you. That if you are successful and wealthy, it is your your proof, your evidence that you are in fact doing what God wants from you. Huh? Kind of a crazy idea. Is it possible that it could be the product of learning? Because, we come to associate. There's a strong association between a $5 and a yummy Whopper meal. Okay? Something like that. The $5 is what's called a secondary reinforcer, because the only reason, see, the yummy Whopper meal is a primary reinforcer, and it is the primary reinforcer which satisfies the biological needs of, hunger, thirst, etc. And so the $5 is associated with the yummy Whopper meal, and it becomes a secondary association, a secondary reinforcer. So we find, though, that this money has become associated with so many primary reinforcers that it comes to have value all in of its own. And so we find that this materialism problem, I know some people that are just super wealthy, and it's just nuts. It's like, so why do they need this and this and this? I mean, honestly, they have 3 houses that they go to at different times of the year, mansions, shouldn't just be honest. But the one that they spend the most of the time at is in Puerto Rico. Because if you spend 6 months and 1 day in Puerto Rico, bada bing, property tax or taxes, or you're now a Puerto Rico resident, and so now you get a whole different tax system. And it's like, you've got so much money that you can afford 3 of these mansions and untold number of vehicles and blah, 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 blah. Why the hell wouldn't you pay your taxes? Okay? And it's really an interesting idea, because for me, if I get, let's say, a nice tax return, okay? I got a pretty good one this year. So I get a nice tax return, and you know what? It has a representation to me. Okay, I'm going to take that money, I'm going to put it in the bank, and it's building towards a new vehicle, because both of our vehicles are looking, you can see a horizon on the vehicles. They're going to have to be going pretty soon. And so that tax return represents a chunk of a vehicle. It has an actual tangible existence. But once you have $1 billion, what does a couple of $1,000 represent to you anymore? Does it have any tangible representation? Does it represent, grocery bill for 3 months or something? No, it has no tangible representation. And so all of a sudden, it's not a matter of wanting to gain money to gain secondary reinforcers or items or products, but simply getting more just to have more. And it just changed its representation at that point. And so here is in fact, here is the original in the bottom right corner. This is the original image that really is used to justify that argument. Does money buy happiness? And you say, no, money does not, in fact, buy happiness. And so we look at this image here, and we see that from 1957 to 2000, whatever it says there, you see the line going up, and that's personal income. All right, personal income is going up, 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 up. But check this out. They ask people, are you very happy? And a very consistent level of number of people report themselves very happy, despite so money doesn't buy happiness. But as a caveat, I actually saw some interesting psychological research recently on this exact question. And instead of does money buy happiness, what it was, well, it depends on how you spend the money. Okay? Because money, which is spent on experiences or clearing up your time, okay? It sounds terrible, but using your money to pay somebody to clean your house buys happiness, because it clears up your time and it removes an unwanted chore. Okay? Using your money to buy vacations can buy happiness. And so it's quite a powerful idea that money doesn't buy happiness when we use the money for material possessions. Okay? So it doesn't always make us happier. And so now what happens is the problem partly is that we compare ourselves to others around us. And so what happens is when you're in college, you compare yourself to everybody else, and everybody else is pretty much the same as you, and you're all broke, right? Sorry, that's college for you. Then you graduate college and you're new in the job, and so you compare yourself to people that are about the same age as you and at the same situation in life. And you think to yourself, you know what? I'm just the same as everybody else. The fact is, you're way better than you were, but you just compare yourself to everybody else. And so the wealthier and we get, or the more established in our careers we get, we change the group that we compare ourselves to. Okay? What was a luxury yesterday becomes tomorrow's necessities, right? It goes from luxury to common to everyday to necessity. So quite a move right there. So it's an interesting thought. So personally, I don't let myself fall into this trap. And so what happens is that here's a story for you. Back when I was in graduate school, and I was really poor. So my wife couldn't even get a job because of her immigration status, and we had my graduate student salary, and that was it. So every once in a while, man, maybe once every 3 weeks or something, we would go to Burger King and we would get a Whopper Junior meal and we would split a Whopper Junior meal. Okay? And it was all sweet and romantic and everything. So one time we go in and they say, "Hey, do you want cheese on that?" And my wife says, "No, thank you." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, what? You love, she that's the only place she'll eat cheese is on a Whopper. She wants cheese on the Whopper, no doubt." She's like, "No, no, 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 no." So we get our Whopper meal, we go to the table, we sit down, and she pulls a slice of cheese out of her purse, puts it on the sink. What? Wait a minute. It was like 25 cents to add the cheese, and we probably had to pay at least 10 cents for that slice that you pull from your purse, right? So what the hell was that, right? And so I always remember that moment. And so anytime, you feel oh, my car is getting, oh, remember the cheese, okay? No matter what kind of discomfort or displeasure or whatever you feel is not working out for you, it's clear that we are in a good position if you compare yourself to, okay? And I admit, though, I am guilty of it myself, because when I first moved into my house, here's the adaptation level phenomenon. When I first moved into my house, the house that I currently live in, this house right here, I was thinking to myself, this is better than anything I could have ever envisioned in my life growing up. I grew up pretty poor, so this is better than anything I could have ever even imagined living in. But after you live in it for a handful of years, you're like, oh, well, it needs to be painted, And so you adapt, okay? And that's what the adaptation level phenomenon is all about, is that we adapt to our current level. And so even somebody that wins the lottery, if somebody wins the lottery, all of a sudden their happiness, woo! But within a year, right back where you started, because you're comparing your current level of wealth to your recent level of wealth. I'm really no better than I was last week. Okay? So, in an interesting twist, the country of Bhutan has implemented an interesting national decision-making plan. Okay, most countries, what happens is they make all decisions based on things such as gross domestic product. Okay, if I make this decision, how will the gross national product, and so it's all about the money. It's all about the monetary outcomes. Well, the Kingdom of Bhutan is a Buddhist nation, and clearly the Buddhist ideology has permeated this idea. And so instead, they focus on gross national happiness. And so the idea is that you want to focus on the good outcomes that are above and beyond money. I mean, money is part of gross national happiness. It is a part. And so what happened was the Bhutan's king, he basically looked at his kingdom as his children and said, what would make my children happy? Okay? And so as an example, you might say there's a forest. And there are really two choices. You can chop down the forest. If you chop down the forest, then what's going to happen is that there will be jobs for the people that are cutting the wood. You can sell the wood, make some money. You might even be able to use the wood as part of a national industry, maybe like furniture making or something. If the forest is cut down, then maybe you can plant fields and create maybe agricultural, or now maybe you can perhaps get a road build a road so that perhaps isolated villagers might be able to reach hospitals. So there's lots of advantages to cutting down, some of which do involve, money. But there are some advantages to leaving it. And again, in more of a Buddhist mindset, the serenity and peace that my people feel when they look out and see uncut forest. How do you quantify that? And that's what Bhutan has tried to do, is to quantify and make decisions based on, how would these outcomes work? And it's not always money. There are many, many other considerations, as there should be, okay? And so what we find is that this gross national happiness, in fact, the king of Bhutan, he goes to his happiness advisors, rather than his economic advisors. And at one point they said, your people would be happiest if they had a democracy. Well, says the king, I abdicate my throne, okay? He steps down as the king to allow his people the democracy that he believes will maximize their happiness. So that's a beautiful idea, because too many decisions nowadays are based solely on economic considerations. And so what happens is, even when college students go to select a major, often they're being pushed by ROI, or return on investment. Like somehow the amount of money, tuition that you spend on your diploma, and compare that to how much you're going to make across your career. And it's like, yeah, but what about the satisfaction? I'm sorry, psych majors, we have a terrible ROI. I mean, the amount of time and money and commitment that we put in, the amount of paycheck we get out, it's not a great deal. But hopefully, psych majors, we recognize this happiness thing, or satisfaction. That is, how do you value, I found my life's purpose? All right, how do you balance money with life purpose? And you just can't make these comparisons. And so if money does not buy happiness, where does a good life come from? Well, clearly, close supportive relationships are critical to health and happiness in every way possible. Obviously, positive thinking habits. Yeah, you just wake up in the morning and you smile, all right? Today's going to be a good day. I try to use, I'm not a therapist, in case you didn't notice, but yeah, I mean, it's clear, even when you have a bad day and you're sitting there stewing in your bad day, force yourself and say, okay, there had to have been at least one positive thing that happened today. Let me think about that for a little bit before I go back to stewing on the bad stuff. Okay? Although flow is actually quite powerful as well. Flow is a beautiful thing. It's this idea put together by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And what he says is that true happiness, and this is really, by the way, if you know your ancient Greek philosophers, this is Epicureanism, or Epicurus's philosophy. Epicureanism, which states that every time you have some large, you think, oh, happiness is going to a party. Yeah, but going to a party is always followed by like a hangover. So big happiness in this way is followed by a crash, right? And so Epicurus and then Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi say, no. True happiness comes from a steady, stable satisfaction. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi takes it further and says, true satisfaction or true happiness is to achieve a flow state. And a flow state, according to Csikszentmihalyi, is the idea of getting so engaged in a task, getting so engrossed that you lose track of time. And chances are a flow state doesn't come from a party, but it comes from something like knitting, maybe even something silly, crochet, or whatever it is you're doing that you're just so engaged in. But I'll leave it with my super secret formula to happiness. Here is mine. Never overbuy on your home. Your home mortgage will be the largest financial drag on you, period. It will be. And if the bank offers you, okay, the mortgage company did in fact offer in 2006. The mortgage company offered me $350,000. Here, go find a house for $350,000. Now I looked at that 350,000 and I looked at my monthly payments and I looked at my salary and I was like, you know what? I'd have very little left. I can afford that, sure, but what would I have left afterward? Okay? How the hell can I enjoy my life? So I took a much smaller loan, 135,000. And here's what I was able to do. My mortgage payments were easy to make. And so now all of a sudden what happens is I have money left over. What is money left over? Money left over is cheese on the cheeseburger, okay? Money left over is you want something, you can buy it. All right? You don't have to worry about it. What, you want a new phone? All right, buy a new phone. Since you have saved this many dollars per month by not buying that big old house. And so all my extra money gets used for vacation. I'm not rich. Don't pretend I have all that extra money. I got to be careful there. But vacations, okay? Because I didn't overbuy on my home, I go on at least one major vacation a year. At least one, if not more than one. So we find that happiness can be purchased if you do make the right choices. So with that, we've got the end of the course. And so hopefully you've got now a pretty good handle on this idea that we started with at the beginning, is that you are fundamentally a social creature and that your behavior in the presence of others is incomparable to how it is without others. All right? So it's been a fun class and I'll see y'all around.